Okay, here's what I want to know from you. You said the most important thing from your perspective is this discovery of consciousness, this dimension of our experience. I'd like to know from you how that has changed you, if you will, and how you vacillate within yourself from having that connection to that unalloyed, untarnishable state, and then being like, oh, Sam, the identified with his thoughts and emotions person, sort of where you are in that process and how this discovery has changed you.
Well, it's changed me quite fundamentally because it's given me a perspective on my suffering and my well-being. I mean, just what it means to live a good life, how I depart from that experience moment by moment. It's just given a totally different perspective on the deepest questions of just how to be happy in this world. And it's a perspective that it just would be impossible to have by merely thinking about it, by merely having new beliefs or new opinions or new thoughts to lay over your experience, right? It's not a matter of believing anything. It's not. It's a kind of skill on some level. You know, it's being able to pay attention in a certain way and notice something very specific about the nature of all conscious experience, of experience in any moment, whether it's just an ordinary experience of just having a conversation like this, or checking your email, or if it's just a peak experience, I mean, an experience you might have on psychedelics or in some altered state. This is always there to be noticed. There's no thinker of our thoughts. There's no one to which it all refers. It's just experience. Right? It's just this openness in which everything is appearing, and there's no and as such, there's nothing. There's no problem with it, really. There's nothing. There's no. The moment you notice that, you're noticing what it's like when you're no longer grasping at what's pleasant or pushing what's unpleasant away. So there's an equanimity intrinsic to that recognition. And so it's given me this capacity to, the moment I notice I'm suffering, the moment I notice that I'm contracting, I'm unhappy, I'm reacting negatively to experience, it gives me an alternative to the usual, to the default response, which is to locate the source of my pain and unhappiness out in the world, right? So somebody does something that annoys me, and I'm reacting to that person as this kind of unpleasant stimulus, right? Someone cuts me off in traffic, or someone says something that I find offensive, whatever it is. And I begin to contract and react, and I'm disposed, as everyone is, to now begin to figure out how to rearrange the world so as to make me happier, right? There is an alternative, and the alternative is to recognize that the actual source of your suffering in that moment is you. It's something you're doing. It's something you're not seeing. It's something you're now collapsing into. It's almost like a muscular contraction. It's like you're pinching yourself, and you're wondering why you're uncomfortable, right? So the meditative journey really is one of becoming more and more sensitive to that process, and more honest about it, and to relinquish that reactivity sooner and sooner, so that the half-life of one's departures from a feeling of well-being, the half-life of anxiety and anger and impatience and whatever the negative emotion is, becomes much, much shorter, because the moment it arises, it becomes a kind of mindfulness alarm, and then you're beginning to punctuate it with just moments of clear seeing. You're no longer thinking about what a jerk that guy is. You're just noticing the physiology of anger or impatience begin to dissipate. The non-dual side, I mean, what I just described there is even possible with dualistic practice, with a dualistic practice of mindfulness, right? You can still feel like a subject in the head and pay sort of scrupulous attention to the arising of thought and the arising of emotion, and delink them just by just patiently noticing them, and let the negative mental state just dissipate on its own. And so that is a kind of superpower you can get even when you're practicing dualistically and you still feel like you're the meditator doing something. The non-dual part allows you to recognize that consciousness is free even before the character of experience has changed, right? So even before the physiology of anger has dissipated, the moment you recognize there's no center to it, there's just this condition of freedom. You're free of self. You're free of a problem. And yes, the anger will dissipate again over the course of seconds, but your freedom there is no longer contingent upon its dissipating, right? Like it's just energy. I mean, this actually is where, Tantra, which I've never explicitly practiced, but which comes in here. I mean, Tantra, as you probably know, is a system of practice where you begin to use these energy states, even classically negative energy states like anger. You just contact them as raw energy, and they on this account begin to arise as bliss, right? I mean, like you can begin to just contact the pure energetics of even negative emotions and use that, kind of bend them back into kind of meditative energy, and expand your mind that way. Well, a non-dual recognition essentially accomplishes that, where it's just energy. It doesn't, like the anger, the moment the center drops out, doesn't have the psychological implications it had a moment before, and it is just energy, and there's nothing to do with it. So as to how often I vacillate between these kinds of conditions where I'm recognizing consciousness without center, or I'm getting identified with thought and reacting and contracting, this happens thousands of times a day, right? I mean, this is not, I'm certainly not stable in this recognition of non-duality. But the crucial change in me that happened once I started practicing this way, with some real diligence. I mean, I probably spent about a year on silent retreat, mostly on Vipassana retreats in increments of 3 months to 2 months to 1 month to 1 week. I mean, I did lots of retreats of various lengths. Again, mostly in a Vipassana context. Even after a year of doing that, I still wasn't able to practice this way. I mean, it wasn't until I spent some time explicitly getting non-dual teachings in the Dzogchen tradition with some great lamas in Nepal, and I spent some time with some Advaita teachers in India. I mean, just for me, Dzogchen was the crucial piece. I mean, and specifically the teachings I got with Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, who's really just the most wonderful meditation teacher I really have ever met. Just in terms of the skill with which he pointed out the nature of mind. It wasn't until I got those teachings that I could say this about my practice, which is that any moment of mindfulness for me is now synonymous with noticing the illusoriness of the self, or the centralessness of consciousness, or non-dual awareness, right? Depending on how you want to describe it, or the Buddhist concept of emptiness, right? I mean, these are slightly different concepts, but they're naming this same experience from a different angle. Whereas before, when I was practicing mindfulness, again, even very diligently, I mean, on a silent retreat where you're doing nothing but you're in silence for months and you're doing nothing but practice, and you're just trying to link one moment of mindfulness to the next. It was true of me to say for most of that time that I could be mindful in a way that was not delivering this insight into the illusoriness of the self. I still felt like a subject paying attention to objects, right? I still felt like there was somebody meditating. And so the hallmark for me of non-dualism is for your mindfulness to become synonymous with the cutting through of that illusion, right? And it just becomes so that's the first time in practice where one can honestly say that one doesn't have a goal any longer in practice. One's not trying to get anywhere, because in each moment of mindfulness, you really are arriving at the goal, right? And so in Dzogchen, they talk about taking the goal as the path. And it's not, it's, in my view, in my experience, that's not just hype. That really is what differentiates that kind of practice from other styles of practice.